Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbool with you at PTV World, and as you can see, I've been joined by two senior analysts, Farouk Patafi and Raja Faisal, as always, part of the debate. In today's show, we're going to be talking about two very important topics. One, of course, is with reference to who the caretaker setup is going to be led by, a name that we haven't really seen coming up yet or being finalized in terms of who it is going to be, and also in terms of when and how the next elections are going to be held. So these are important points in terms of the way that we've seen the political developments coming in throughout this week. We are, of course, also expecting that the assemblies will be dissolved tomorrow, as was discussed previously as well. And this is important, especially in terms of the fact that we still don't really have a final name yet, but it has been said by the Interior Minister that it will be announced. It was supposed to be announced either today or tomorrow. So we're hoping that we'll get to know tomorrow exactly who it is going to be and whether or not different political parties have come to a consensus. And then, of course, with the opposition as well in terms of who will be leading the caretaker setup. The next fact, of course, with reference to the census of 2023, the results, of course, ratified by the CCI, which now means that the delimitations are in order. And then, of course, a delay is expected, with the Interior Minister also speaking about how they are most likely to be scheduled in March next year. And this is important, especially in terms of the kind of the powers that the caretaker setup would hold, the challenges that they will have to see, particularly the ones on the economic front regarding the IMF bailout package, and also in terms of exactly how will those powers enable moving forward an election that is important in the country. And then, of course, the onus that lies on the ECB in terms of being able to conduct the elections in due time. Of course, there's going to be a process involved in the delimitations as well, but whether or not it's going to be a smooth one with everybody in agreement is, of course, a question mark. So we're going to be taking a look at all of these developments and try and understand what is expected to happen in the country in the coming days, and then, of course, in the eventual months as well. I've already introduced my in-house guest, but we're also going to be joined online by Zulfikar Ali Badr, leader PPP. Thank you very much, Zulfikar, for joining us and being part of the discussion. And let me start with you, because there are big question marks still that remain in terms of who it is that is going to be leading the caretaker setup. And of course, we'll be finding out that soon. But in terms of the way that different political parties, particularly the PPP and the PMLN, and the stance that they have, do you think that this is something that has already been decided and the parties are in agreement in terms of who should be the right candidate leading forward, or if there are any other names that are being proposed by your party?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you, Sana, for inviting, and my regards to the members who are sitting with you. Uh, Pakistan People's Party leadership has always been in consultation with rest of the political parties and stakeholders, and they believe in consultation. They believe that things should be consulted before finalizing it. So, meanwhile, there is a lot of rumors and there is a lot of hearsay. Nothing has been by today, by now, has been finalized, but the consultation is still ongoing between the political parties and their leadership. And our party leadership is still in touch with the ruling party coalition partners and other stakeholders. So the name should be finalized, where all the stakeholders should build a consensus on that particular name. So there is going to be a meeting of prime leader of the house and leader of the opposition on the names. So by that time, I think the names will be shortlisted, and three names from the ruling party will be passed on to the prime minister, and those names will be discussed with the leader as leader of the house, with the leader of opposition, and leader of opposition have also uh, three names which he is going to consult and discuss it with, and then Mr. Prime Minister is going to come back and discuss it with rest of the political parties and the heads of the political parties and their leadership. So I think it's going to take a day or so, and or maybe a quick, decision by consulting with the leadership right away then and there, that these are the names suggested by the leader of the opposition, and everybody is going to give them empower him to decide on their own. So I think tomorrow is the day where we can expect that something is going to come out on a short listing. So Pakistan People's Party, as I said earlier, believes in consultation, and uh, because of us, because of the leadership of Mr. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, the PDM came into being, and this ruling party, the ruling coalition came into power. This was the brainchild of Mr. Bilawal Bhutto Zardari. So most likely things are going to come out tomorrow, and things are going to get clear. The fog in the air, in the environment, is going to get clear by tomorrow evening. So another day. So I think Prime Minister is going to dissolve the assemblies by tomorrow night, sometimes after 7, 8 p.m., whenever he feels appropriate. And the assembly is going to go to the president, and after 48 hours, the assembly will be dissolved.
All right. And before I continue, let's take a look at what the Prime Minister had to say, and then I'll come back to you.
कल मैं हमारी हुकूमत की मुद्दत मुकम्मल हो जाएगी और इंशाअल्लाह हम जो आईनी तकाज़े पूरे करते हुए हम जो इक़्तिदार जो है वो एक आर्जी या इंटरिम हुकूमत के हवाले कर देंगे। लेकिन अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह जाने से पहले एक बड़ा मरबूत और जामे पाकिस्तान की तरक्की और खुशहाली का निज़ाम वो मार्ज़ वजूद में।
Right. So, Faisal, of course, we're happy that, of course, the democratic process is continuing, and it's important, of course, especially in Pakistan, where we've rarely seen that. And then also, when we talk about where these circumstances are going in terms of the political and economic crisis, it's important that we're able to make the decision of the caretaker setup quite carefully and with consensus as well. But I also want to know that now that, of course, there is a delay in elections anyway with reference to the delimitations, but in terms of the consensus being achieved and being achieved soon, do you think that there could possibly be any bumps along the way in terms of the different political parties when they get to decide who it is that is going to be leading the caretaker setup, and also the opposition, or do you think it'll be a smooth one?
I think, Sana, it would be a smooth one because so far we have seen that a year and a half of PDM's government, almost everything was agreed upon, and there were no differences between two of the major parties. We're talking about PMLN and we're talking about People's Party. And if we go through one of these statements which comes out from yesterday's speech by Bilawal Bhutto, Foreign Minister, it was quite interesting. He said that the decisions which are being made by the senior leadership of both of the parties, there should be consensus in a way that of future. Of course, he's talking about the future of PMLN and future of People's Party. Both of the parties, they are aligned to each other. This is quite interesting from both of the parties, that they are even looking at the aligned future of both of the parties as well. We might not see them contesting elections together under the banner of PDM, but we might see lots of seat adjustments in coming days. And what I see it as, that the obviously consensus is there already. There is a basic understanding that the names which will be coming forward, they would be agreed upon from both of the major parties of PDM, and I think it would be quite interesting to see, and probably it would be the first time that the parties, two major parties, PMLN and People's Party, they would be coming ahead with a name that would be with the consent from each other.
All right. And of course, Farooq, this is important when we take a look at how the next couple of months with the caretaker setup are going to then eventually involve important decisions. And I also want to come back to then whether or not the decision making is also being decided based on the fact that there are going to be, for example, economic concerns or challenges that that the government, the caretaker setup will have to deal with, because we understand, of course, that their powers were also increased with a certain purpose in terms of them being able to then make certain decisions that are required by the country. Will that be perhaps one of the deciding factors as to this choice?
Right, absolutely, Sana. First of all, let me compliment you on your optimism. You said next couple of months. I don't know where we are at regarding
right,
that.
Right,
because
absolutely.
people keep on actually speculating whether it is going to be a government of 3 months or 6 months or whatever, right? Regardless, we still are waiting to see what exactly happens. I wanted to actually bring in one more correction also. First of all, my salam to Badr Saab. Then also regarding what he said, I think in the heat of the moment, he ended up saying that the Prime Minister is going to dissolve assemblies. The Prime Minister of Pakistan is only the chief executive at the center, so he can, and he is empowered to dissolve only one assembly, that is National Assembly. Others will be actually dissolved by the provincial or federating unit chief executive. So that is going to be timed together, I assume, but it is what it is. Regarding where we are at, again, Faisal is also very optimistic that all political parties are actually singing from the same hymn sheet. I don't think that is the case. We haven't even seen the ministers actually singing from the same hymn sheet, right? Some were saying something else, some were, and from within the same party, by the way. My biggest concern is that according to Prime Minister's own words, we have entered into the final 24 hours, the final countdown of this, the current political dispensation, and even right now we don't know what exactly comes after that. These are political parties which are usually, in concert, which actually agree on most of the things. So it would have been infinitely kinder on this weaker constitution country that the government would have, and all these political parties would have actually come up with a name or two about whom we would have known what exactly is going to rule the country in coming days. That did not happen. Now we keep on speculating, and because of that speculation, in the end, there is uncertainty. My own hunch says that if they haven't agreed on a name by today, because the opposition leader was not available for the meeting, and amazingly, this is the opposition. Everybody keeps on saying that is very cooperative, but he was not available for such a critical meeting. So then the question is whether there is going to be a consensus name. Usually what happens is that in the end, both sides actually, the government and opposition actually come up with a certain list of names, and those names are tallied, and if they cannot actually agree on anything, the matter is referred first to a committee, a parliamentary committee, and then if it is not even resolved in that scenario, then that name goes to the election commission, and election commission, as we have seen in Punjab's case, they end up with a name, right? So my assumption would then be that they have brought it to the last minute, so that perhaps they are not going to, or they are not ready to actually name a certain name or give a consensus name. And why would that be? Because usually in politics it is very tricky that if you elevate one person, that person would come with his own sphere of influence, and there will be people who are opposed to that sphere of influence, and then you automatically alienate somebody else. So what happens then? In the end, I think that we are going to go end up with some technocratic Prime Minister, and that will, if we don't resolve the name by tomorrow in the morning, then we are going to perhaps see that election commission is going to pick one of the technocrats from the long list, and then we will see who's going to rule the country. And economics, of course, is going to play a very important role, because we have seen SIFC and then our own IMF agreements, they are going to play a very important role as well. I hope I have answered all your questions.
Yes, I want another clarification though, in terms of the kind of procedure that exists when there is absence of consensus. I understand that there is the parliamentary committee and the ECP, but I want to know that while that is happening, what sort of setup then exists in terms of ruling the country? Who's then looking after the country?
Right, that is a very curious question, Sanam. Let me take you back to a very interesting episode in Pakistan's history. When Mian Nawaz Sharif was disqualified as PM, for 2 or 3 days there wasn't any Prime Minister in the country. And amazingly, our car, that is Pakistan's governance car, continued without any hitch. So I would say that car usually has an autopilot, and it keeps on moving on that. And then there is a Prime Minister who's just there to supervise things and as a hard body. So
Yeah.
that seems to be the case.
Does that put into question the role of the Prime Minister then?
Yeah, of course. What else? I
do you
mean,
need it for then?
my metaphor is amazing.
Yeah.
Let me give you one example.
Okay.
When my kids were younger, right, they would always try to, while I was driving, they would try to climb into my lap, and they would try to mess with steering. So what I did was I found a smaller steering for them to actually keep on playing it, sitting in their own seat. And they would keep on thinking that they are controlling the vehicle, right? So my cynicism says that the Prime Minister's seat is similar to that.
Yeah,
Wow, okay.
Sana,
Yes,
if I just give a point. Obviously, we know that Speaker of the Assembly is a constitutional post, and I think in the absence of Prime Minister of Pakistan, he would be the one who can be considered as
No. Pakistan doesn't have a chain of succession when it comes to PMs. President, of course, I grant you that first of all, if President is absent, then Chairman Senate actually presides in his place.
Yeah.
And if he is not there, Speaker National Assembly actually fulfills those responsibilities. With Prime Minister, there's no chain of succession in the country. I've been shrieking out loud for past 20 years that we have to create some mechanism to ensure that succession is in order, but that doesn't happen here.
Yeah.
Right, and Zulfikar Sahab, this also obviously puts into question the entire existence of a caretaker setup as well, in terms of whether or not this is something that is absolutely necessary in the way forward as well. And I understand that the new bill has empowered the caretaker setup, and there are important decisions to be taken in. But if we take a look at where we stand today in terms of where the matter still is, and we're expecting the assemblies to be dissolved tomorrow without any name as of now, and the fact that we're not sure if there is going to be consensus or not, does that mean that this can be something that can be easily done so in terms of the kind of disregard that it puts in the way that it's going to impact the procedures? And if it doesn't impact the procedures, then can the country really move on autopilot?
In my opinion, I want to express my own, analysis. First, I want to give you example of Mr. Raja Parvez Ashraf when he was the Prime Minister. It took few days to nominate the caretaker Prime Minister. So he was right there. Assemblies weren't there. They have completed their constitutional term. But Mr. Raja Parvez Ashraf was actually taking care of the day-to-day affairs till the time the caretaker Prime Minister. So I think till the time caretaker Prime Minister comes, Mr. Shahbaz Sharif Saab will continue, and he will be looking after though there will be no cabinet and no other government machinery, but he is going to look after the affairs of the government.
Right.
And
Under what authority, Zulfikar Sahab, under what authority exactly will that happen?
You see,
What sort of legal space
in
exists for that to happen?
in constitution, the things till the time the new Prime Minister comes. So till the time the caretaker Prime Minister comes, somebody has to actually, go towards that point where you hand over and take over. You do that exchange of handing over and taking over between that. So I think there shouldn't be a problem with that, because in constitution there isn't anything mentioned the Prime Minister once the assemblies are dissolved and Prime Minister is no more, so he actually work on a de facto position of a Prime Minister, but he has to look after the day-to-day affairs. As I have given you the example of Mr. Raja Parvez Ashraf, he was still intact at that time till the time caretaker Prime Minister took over. So another thing, we have been talking about the names. In my humble opinion, I personally feel I may be wrong. Things have been, principally agreed on couple of or three names, but this time the name hasn't come out because it's between four or five people uh, in the country, and they have been playing cards and hiding their cards, not even showing it. And even by this time, nobody has been informed, or maybe people have been informed, and nobody is, speaking out a word that they've been contacted to become one of the caretaker ministers in the cabinet. So this time everybody is very smart, playing smart and being very careful. Uh, it seems like uh,
With your permission, Sana, I had a very quick question regarding what Badr Saab said. Badr Saab, when you actually gave us Raja Saab's example that he was officiating PM at that time, just help us understand who was the principal secretary at that time. My understanding is that when we talk about the country and we keep on talking about autopilot, everybody keeps on thinking that perhaps we are referring to civil military relations, but actually it is the principal secretary who is de facto prime minister day in, day out, and their signatures matter. I gave the example of Mian Nawaz Sharif's absence, or he was disqualified. At that time also it was principal secretary to the PM who was calling shots for 2 days. Do you think that it was Madam Sethi had retired, if I'm not wrong? Was it Lashari Saab who was the principal secretary or somebody else?
I don't actually remember, was it Mr. Khushnood Lashari or somebody else, but I think the principal secretary has to operate through the cabinet secretary. So cabinet secretary is also a very important position when there is somebody is officiating and does not have the actual official capacity till the time caretaker setup comes. So this is a standby arrangement between the uh, principal secretary, secretary cabinet, and then the secretary establishment. So these are three important persons who actually uh, make all the decisions, and then they pass on and they manage everything.
Absolutely.
Right,
I
absolutely. So
very
does that
quickly-
mean it's not the previous prime minister then, Farooq? Yes.
Yeah, I very quickly actually wanted to include something here. You know, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There is a very quotable quote, and of course, they have the institution of president. So, galactic president, right? It is the title. They say the job of a president is not to exercise power, but to draw attention away from it, right? That's why the presidents usually are most outrageous characters possible, right? Because people then keep on gossiping about them. But regarding the actual power, this is the case in point. Nobody remembers at that time who was the principal secretary, who was the establishment secretary, who was the cabinet secretary. Why? Because they are the actual people who exercise power in all those circumstances. And that's why no matter who the officiating or actual or caretaker prime minister is, it is going to be the same team, essentially led by the principal secretary, whose signatures matter in such circumstances, which will continue no matter whether there is a prime minister or there isn't one.
All right. And Faisal, when we take a look at this scenario, especially in terms of the kind of nuances involved, I then want to understand in terms of the empowerment now of the caretaker setup. There are, of course, various reasons given for it, but there were a lot of reservations that different political parties had on that as well. And I want to then understand whether or not there is going to be any sort of problematic aspects potentially that can exist that comes with these with this empowerment, because there is, of course, the importance of certain decisions such as economic ones, but in terms of, for example, the conduct of the general elections and the way that we want more transparency, do you think that there could be any potential problems with the empowerment that now exists?
Well, Sana, power is important, and of course, where it comes from, that is more important. And this time around, of course, people who are going to come to the office, obviously they will be more empowered. Traditionally, we see that there is only one thing they are concerned about, and that is free and fair election. And they complete their term and simply hand over to the elected ones. But this time around, of course, extraordinary situations are faced by Pakistan. When we talk about extraordinary, of course, Pakistan went through a phase where we saw obviously there was a political turmoil, plus there was economic turmoil as well. And it's more of economy that needs to be adjusted, and that needs to be put on the autopilot. And of course, pilot must be there, and pilot should be someone who knows how the autopilot is working, and if it drags itself anyhow, they have to fix it back. So obviously this time around, if to major parties of Pakistan, the political parties, PMLN and People's Party, who have a history of ruling this country for a long time.
Yeah.
And of course, if they are bringing in somebody, they have to be extra cautious about who they bring in.
Right.
And that is why we are seeing that so far we are not seeing such type of consensus already built in.
Right, Faisal, but my question remains, in terms of the powers the caretaker setup will be able to exercise. I want to understand, of course, when we hear the current ruling elites say that the onus now is on the ECP, and there's a lot of authority also constitutionally in terms of the conduct of the general election that exists, but we haven't actually seen that happen many times in the past in terms of the ECP actually being able to do that. And now with the caretaker setup also empowered further than just the day-to-day activities, will there be that authority that needs to come in from the Election Commission of Pakistan for the conduct of general elections, and there will be no problems with the caretaker setup?
That's what is quite interesting and quite important for coming days as well. Recently, we saw one of the statements from Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif that he said it that we hope that it is in time, but obviously the ball is in the court of ECP. So if this is the case, then we might not see any kind of different statement or different kind of decision from the interim setup. What I'm trying to say is interim setup would be empowered, but not to that extent where if ECP delays the election, they will not be in a position to simply say that no, you can't delay it, or you have to look into it once more and bring in the new date.
Right.
So to me, I think it would entirely be on ECP and what kind of reservations they have and what kind of problems they are facing, and they need to fix that before going towards the election. And probably interim setup would not disagree with them in coming future.
Right, and Farooq, similar question to you, but also in terms of the kind of pressure that is being put on the ECP, and rightly so perhaps in terms of the general elections. I want to understand whether or not there is a guarantee that there will be no problems between the caretaker setup and the ECP, and also in terms of us looking at a time frame of the general elections. I understand the Interior Minister has talked about March 2024, but could it possibly be longer than that?
Yeah, I don't think that it can be longer than that, Sana, because there is a caveat, a huge caveat, and that is Senate elections. You realize that even when we don't have National Assembly, our Senate, which is the territorial house, upper house of the Parliament, it continues to function, right? Half of it is falling vacant in March. So where does the electoral college come from? It comes from the provincial assemblies and the federal assembly, right? In the absence of that, you cannot actually fill those seats. And if those vacant seats are going to stay vacant, there's going to be a humongous constitutional crisis. So in that view, I think that it will be very difficult. And of course, we cannot predict anything. I'm already, on May 9th, I honestly thought that tomorrow, the next day, we are going to see some kind of martial law. I'm surprised at my luck that there isn't one, right? And we continue to have this structure, whatever it is, of democratic processes. The courts are functioning okay, the constitution is in place, the parliament is there. Now, if you are from opposition and if you are disgruntled, you would keep on making light of all these facts, but they are there. In martial law, that doesn't happen, right? With that kind of a situation, I think that I can hope that it will not extend beyond that, but it seems certain that March 2024 is going to be the time when the elections at least are the earliest they are possible. Now, I wanted to also to speak about this empowerment business, right? I've openly criticized the idea of caretaker setup since the day one, because nowhere else it exists, right? In countries like Australia, a few others, where the election time comes, in America, they are called lame duck session or lame duck government, right? But in other places also, the same government is called interim or caretaker government, because they are taking care of day-to-day business. And then the elections, because the election commission or whatever body, for example, in America, FEC, whichever body is there, it is so empowered that it takes care of the whole business of governance, right? We saw in America an attempt by a sitting president to disrupt an election, and where did it end up? The next government was, of course, democratically elected, and there again the role of military also comes in, because in America nobody knows that it was General Milley and other generals who saved the bacon on January 6th. Had they not been there, I think the country would have descended into chaos. In Pakistan, I don't think we need a caretaker setup in the future. We have to do away with the idea, but right now, because as I pointed out, remember, there's some confusion that people don't want to appreciate. And there are two approaches to it. One is PTI's way, which was a wrong approach. The other one is what I'm going to recommend. You have to realize who is the most powerful person in any room. And it is secretary, the principal secretary of the Prime Minister, when he sits next to the Prime Minister, right? Because his signature actually runs the whole system, and that continues. And because bureaucracy has had so much power that we keep on talking about General Musharraf, that he was really powerful, but we personally or privately know, because we kept on working with the then government as well, that it was Tariq Aziz, the principal secretary to the president at that time, because at that time system was different. It was Tariq Aziz who called all the shots. And without Tariq Aziz, there wouldn't have been any kind of capacity for General Musharraf to deliver on whatever. He was a general. He was a general president who was initially chief executive officer also, and he was also simultaneously the chairman joint chief of staff committee. With that kind of power, even he needed his principal secretary. So what PTI's approach was, it actually brought a retired bureaucrat and made him advisor to the Prime Minister, supervising establishment division. Establishment division is the place where up to 20th grade, all promotions and postings take place within the bureaucracy, and it is the backbone of bureaucracy. And when you actually try to control it with somebody who is a plant, it actually creates so much problems that bureaucracy stops functioning. And this is exactly we saw in PTI's time. The other approach is, for example, when our army chief was being appointed, remember those days when people would speak or take the whole slate of eligible journals and speak about that? So why can't we have the similar kind of openness and transparency about the people who might qualify as the principal secretary or chief secretary in the province's case, and then cabinet secretary, and then establishment secretary? With that kind of awareness about these roles, I think that power is where it should be. I think everywhere in the world where you have parliamentary democracy, the principal secretary's role is very important. They are very capable people. But why not have transparency so that we know which people are there, what are their strengths and weaknesses? If you can do it to the post of army chief, which shouldn't be discussed on television, why not have the same kind of debate about the principal secretaries as well?
Right, absolutely, and these are important factors. And Zulfikar Sahib, I'd like your comment on that as well. But add to that the issue of now the new census results. They, of course, have been ratified by the CCI, and this means, of course, that delimitations are now going to be taking place. But in terms of what the PPP stands for and the kind of reports that we've been hearing about previously regarding reservations of these delimitations, are there still any possible objections to how this is going to pan out?
I want to comment on what Putafi Saab was saying. Actually, what he was saying, actually, it's the the core issue that we actually have to talk about it. But for that, we have to bring reforms in the bureaucracy, and that is a very difficult thing. Until and unless we don't bring reforms and we don't educate the people and educate the political the electables who come in the parliament. So there is a whole process of mentoring and development and coaching and teaching of all those people who are actually going to go into the elections by not nominating the caretaker government. There used to be a time when I remember, I think till 93 or so, when there was before 93, yeah, there used to be the same prime minister, and he was allowed to contest the election. And in last election, it was 1990, that you can actually become have you be the prime minister and you can contest the election. You can be the chief minister and contest the election, and then come and so at that time, actually, all the people who were sitting in the caretaker government, they were using the resources of the government, the cars and the resources, other resources. So then in 1993, when Mr. Isa Khan and Nawaz Sharif Saab was sent home, so at that time, caretaker prime minister was brought in, and the whole scenario was changed. And particular position which was mentioned by Patafi Saab, the principal secretary and the establishment secretary and the cabinet secretary, these are very important positions. They are the actual people who actually run the government, and they run the show of the government, and they control the bureaucracy all around the Pakistan, because they are the one. And he mentioned about Mr. Tariq Aziz. Tariq Aziz Saab was one of the mentors of the bureaucracy, and he has his own likings and disliking. He has his own lobby, which actually, impacted in the success of Mr. Musharraf running the government successfully. So at that time, because if there wouldn't have been any Mr. Tariq Aziz, Mr. Musharraf would have been in big trouble. So coming back to the point, Pakistan People's Party is very much determined and believes in consensus. And whatever has happened, the consensus was approved by the committee of CCI. Uh, People's Party, if there is anything unconstitutional, Pakistan People's Party leadership is going to have a debate within their party lines, within their core committee, and going to discuss if what were the reasons that it was passed, and if there is anything unconstitutional, then the policy of by the chairman is going to come out, and we will be talking about it. But if the elections are going to be on time and they are constitutional, and then census are going for the delimitations of the constituencies, and that part is also a constitutional. So we will have to actually debate and discuss what action plan should be taken, and what is going to be the party policy and is going to come from the chairman. So we have to wait till that time.
All right. Thank you very much, Zulfikar Ali Badr Saab, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. Faisal, your take also in terms of the impact that these delimitations are going to have, and whether any political party will be raising concerns in various provinces. And I also want to add to that what Zulfikar Saab earlier was talking about in terms of education and the bureaucratic reforms that are needed. Unfortunately, these terms sound more abstract in nature whenever we talk about it. And at the end of the day, it seems to be something that unfortunately is missing even in terms of a direction that needs to be there. If we don't start now, we won't get it, even after a number of years have passed. And that has been the case, unfortunately. So how exactly can this be implemented, and whether or not there is another way to take a look at it without this long-term approach? Is there perhaps a quick fix for this?
There is no quick fix, Sana. And earlier, obviously, when Farooq Bhai was talking about it, and I fully agree with him, that's how it should be. Our system should be an auto system, and of course, people who are on the bureaucracy side, they are the ones, they're the best people who know the system and who know it deeply how it works. And I think this is how it should be. But if we talk about the reforms, if we talk about how to fix it, we remember that previous government, the former prime minister, he always used to highlight that once he comes and he would fix it, and of course he didn't fix it, he couldn't fix it, and it is a very complex system that needs to be, everyone says that it needs to be fixed. Then of course when somebody talks about the reforms,
is it a problem in the system being complex, or the will or capacity for us to fix it?
There's an answer, but carry on.
Yeah, for me, I think the system itself is so empowered that as soon as somebody wants to fix it, it's very hard to do it. It's very hard to do it. And
aren't the people who are trying to fix it more empowered than that? than the system?
The people within the system, of course, they feel more empowered in this system. Of course, if there are reforms, they might not see themselves as powerful as they are right now. So probably nobody wants a very loose grip over power. They want to enjoy the full power, and I think we would always be talking about reforms. But coming towards how a People's Party or how PMLN, once they go towards the election, one thing I'm sensing right now, that People's Party might be the party that that will be highlighted in coming future about if there is a prolonged period, then we might see them protesting against it.
And prolonged, you mean beyond March 2024?
Yeah, no, I would say beyond November. If the time, as soon as it goes beyond 90 days.
It seems that the party is okay with March 2024.
I don't think so. I don't
Okay.
think so. Probably they will use it as their narrative for the future in the coming election, and we might see them, because they would use it as something for debating on during the political processions, and of course we might see them doing bit of protests in the name of, obviously they want restoration of democracy as soon as possible, and they will have to, of course, see things as soon as possible. The election, obviously they want is in time.
Okay.
And to me, I think we might see People's Party playing that role in coming future. Or there is another thing it would be quite interesting to see in coming days, Sana, and that would be the kind of the kind of understanding we saw between these two parties during this government they had for a year and a half. Will we be seeing that during elections? If not in the a coalition election or PDM election, if not that, if not the seat adjustment, then can we see that when we
Okay.
talk about protesting about something, protesting about democracy, protesting about early elections, not a very prolonged time period? This would be quite interesting.
All right, Farooq, you wanted to add something?
Right. When you were asking whether the system is complicated or complex, the answer is yes, absolutely yes. Why? Because when you don't have the kind of oversight that is needed in the system, what you have is a system which is growing like wild tree. And when you don't have the kind of understanding of how complicated or convoluted the growth is, then the problem is that sitting in Islamabad or in any of the capitals, what you actually end up with is the God delusion, that you have the kind of power that your signature can change everything. It doesn't happen. Remember, true reform will have to come from downstairs, right? It will have to come from the grassroots. And that doesn't happen because everyone is obsessed with the center, but real man, real woman, they live at the grassroots level. At their level, there's no democracy because you have bureaucrats essentially and junior bureaucrats actually running day-to-day affairs. You had to have local government system, but nobody allowed it to take off. Similarly, when this country was created, there are two examples, Sana. In India, and I myself come from the landed background. In India and in Bangladesh, when it was created, Bangladesh, they actually carried out land reforms. In Pakistan, or this part of Pakistan, at that time, no similar kind of land reforms took place because then it kept on creating more monopolies. The feudal lords became the industrial lords, then they became bureaucratic lords, and then they ensured that one son in their family goes in every branch. So in the end, you have the monopolies which continue to keep on actually replicating. So when I remember regarding reforms also, I hope I have a minute or half. Right?
Yes.
Okay, that is my curse actually. Every time I start speaking, half a minute remains. But regarding the reforms, I remember in 2013 when Ahsan Iqbal was he actually took over the Ministry of Planning. I requested to him that why not actually go for renaming the ministry and call it Ministry of Reform. because that was the idea. Planning gives you the idea or impression that you're an autocratic or authoritarian country. He kept on saying, yes, we are going to look into it. And he actually instituted a study to reform bureaucracy. But what happened? It disappeared. Then PTI comes, and Ishrat Hussain Sahab is given the power to actually do the similar thing. He continues for 2 years, but what kind of reforms we were told that they are going to be? They actually try to, divide the examination, into 3 phases or 3 structures. Nothing else. When you don't have reforms, then please don't actually give me the word reform. I am sick and tired of it.
Right, absolutely.
And I think it is not going to take off. But let the time be the healer and the free debate or exchange of ideas. With that, you can change a lot.
Absolutely. Thank you, Faisal. Thank you for joining us and being part of the debate. As always, that's all that we have from the show. There's much that remains to be seen, and hopefully we'll be knowing the caretaker nominated and candidate from the opposition and the ruling elite by tomorrow. If not, we're going to see what happens, and we'll be here to talk about it. That's all that we have from the show. See you tomorrow.